who is watching, the goal of this international community is not to help Nigerian Christians or to go after Nigerian Muslims. They do not care. The international community, and let me specify what I mean by international community. The NATO empire, right, the Western European and American empire, does not see any difference between David Hundeyin, who has what you would call a Christian name, or Fatima in Zamfara. The international community doesn't see any difference between us. We are two Black Africans. That is all it sees. We are two Black Africans who have precious minerals under our soil that other people want. So Fatima in Zamfara has gold and lithium and tungsten and manganese and uranium under her feet. They want that. David in the south has oil and arable farmland and freshwater sources, all that under his feet. Those people want that. So if people want your resources, but there are 200 million of you, so you are too much of an obstacle, and getting to those resources isn't that easy because you have this huge, human-sized obstacle. What do? It creates a pretext for military intervention in that society. This was done in Libya. This was done in Syria. This was done in Afghanistan. This was done in Iraq. This was done in Somalia. It was done in Sudan. It's been done in so many places where an external entity constructs a narrative. Whether the narrative is true or not is completely beside the point. Sometimes that narrative is built around a core of truth and then several exaggerations are tacked onto it. Sometimes it's completely false. It doesn't matter. It works just the same.
Right.
Somebody constructs that narrative around your country, and next thing you know, you have boots on your ground. Next thing you know, you lack all sovereignty. Your country becomes a feeding tube for someone else's country. You become a slave in your own land, and this is where it all begins. Narrative.
All right, Mr. Hundeyin, you just spoke about external power. So at this point, most would say external power prefer weak or destabilized states. They can influence a lot when it comes to a country. So do you agree with that? And how is that playing at this point in Nigeria? Where do you see Nigeria going forth? And how do you think we can turn everything around to stabilize what is going on in the country, especially when it comes to security and the narrative that is put out there?
Yes, external powers absolutely do have the power to influence the decisions that are taken by a country at all levels. And this is already happening in Nigeria. One of the ways, the most obvious ways that you can see this happening in Nigeria is the extent to which the World Bank and the IMF, which for those who don't know, even though those institutions have the word international and world in them, those are actually American institutions, right? They're owned by the US government, right? The US government has a controlling stake in both institutions, right? Those are US government appendages. Now, these institutions essentially have almost total control over Nigeria's public policy right now. So every recommendation that is made by the IMF within a few weeks becomes policy, becomes law in Nigeria. So be it the new tax bill, which is to go into operation from January 1 next year, that's an IMF tax bill, right? It was not Bola Tinubu or the Nigerian government that came up with that tax bill. Let's just be clear about that. That bill in its entirety was dictated from Washington, D.C. Be that the new, the proposed constitutional amendments for creating, for example, a citizenship by investment program, which a country like Nigeria, 215 million people, absolutely does not need and would be absurd. These things did not come out of Nigeria. Be that the almost entire seizure of Nigeria's food and health regulatory spaces by a single foreign entity, the Gates Foundation, right, which obviously works in lockstep with the US government. That is just another example of this total capture of Nigeria's government and regulatory infrastructure. And people need to understand when we use terms like imperialism or neocolonialism, those terms sound like ivory tower terms. They sound like things that Kwame Nkrumah used to say in the 1950s. But what those terms actually mean is that in a meaningful, everyday sense, you think you live in a democracy with the paraphernalia of a democratic state, but all all the levers of states that are available in this supposed democracy are seized and controlled by external powers. So if you recall, recently the National Assembly held what was supposed to be a public forum on a public consultation on constitutional amendments. If you look at the picture of this event, this is the National Assembly of a sovereign country talking about amending the constitution of that sovereign country. Who were the people present at that meeting? Right, the logos that you were seeing displayed on the banners of that meeting, you were seeing UK Aid, which is the subsidiary of the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. By the way, the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office is the parent institution of the MI6, right, or the SIS, which is the premier foreign intelligence extension of the UK. So a sovereign country amending its sovereign constitution is doing that in partnership with a foreign intelligence agency. You are seeing names like PLAC, that's the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. PLAC is funded by the MacArthur Foundation, which is a very well-known CIA extension, right? So you have British and US foreign intelligence agencies directly involved in writing your new constitution. That is what it means to be to suffer neocolonialism, to have foreign entities seizing control of your country from under your feet, right? And once that has been done, once that capture has been executed, it doesn't matter whether people physically bring soldiers in to occupy your country or not. Just for the fact that the supposed democratic levers of state, which you think belong to you, have been hijacked, then your country no longer belongs to you. You are no longer sovereign. So in answer to the second question, which is what can Nigeria do to regain its sovereignty? The most important thing, I think, is that people, first of all, need to be aware that these things are even a problem. Because in my interaction with Nigerians, I've realized that if you mention, for example, that, say, I'm just throwing an example out there, that say the Gates Foundation is essentially writing Nigeria's food and health policy, right? All the people who are writing Nigeria's food and health policy, or rewriting it, are in some way, shape, or form on the payroll of an American billionaire who is part of the US government establishment. If you mention that to the typical Nigerian, well, it doesn't understand why that is a problem. It's like, well, Bill Gates he's a nice guy. He just loves Africa. He funds vaccine development to save Africa, save the lives of young African children. He's a philanthropist, right? He's this, honorable Western billionaire who is trying to use his money to save the world. Like, he has made so much money that he has moved on to solving civilizational problems, right? That's what most people in Nigeria actually think. So I think the most important thing is for people to become aware that in the world that we live in, there is no such thing as a freebie. There is no such thing as a philanthropist. There's no such thing as somebody who wants to cross an entire ocean to come to your country to help you. In the world we live in, everything is give and take. Everything is mercantile. If somebody is giving you this thing, you can be sure that what they are taking away from you is 10 or 100 times the value of whatever they're giving you. That is the reality of the world that we live in. And an African, of all people, should be aware of this, given the history that we have. But I think most Nigerians still aren't aware. But I think that public education is the most important factor. Once that education is complete, then the political rollback of this takeover of the Nigerian state can then begin. But the education comes first, which is what people like me are trying to do.
All right.